They expected the cubs to fight over the sweet watermelons, but what they saw instead left the entire field silent. The summer air hung heavy over the valley, carrying with it the smell of ripened fruit and fresh soil. It was harvest season, and the fields on the edge of the countryside brimmed with green leaves sprawling across the ground. Beneath those thick, veined leaves rested something special: watermelons, their striped skins glistening under the afternoon sun. Most days, the only ones tending to these fruits were the farmers and their families. But on this day, the field had visitors no one could have predicted. From the tree-line that bordered the property, two small shapes emerged, bear cubs, their fur soft and fuzzy, their movements clumsy but curious. At first, the cubs stayed close to the shade, peeking out from behind a thick bush. Their noses twitched as they caught the sweet scent of the melons drifting through the warm air. They were young, perhaps only a few months old, still in that stage where every discovery was an adventure. With cautious steps, they padded closer, their claws clicking softly against the dry ground. The cubs' eyes widened as they spotted their prize, a cracked-open watermelon resting at the edge of the field. Perhaps it had split under the sun's heat, or maybe a farmer had dropped it earlier in the day. Either way, its red flesh glistened in the light, juices pooling in the grass. For the cubs, it might as well have been treasure. One of the cubs, the slightly larger one with a darker coat, took the lead. It sniffed the fruit, pressed a paw against it, and then lowered its head. With a messy enthusiasm only a cub could show, it began to lap up the sweetness. The second cub hesitated for a moment, then shuffled closer. In the wild, food often meant competition. Even siblings would sometimes push each other away to get the best share. But what happened next was something different. Instead of shoving its brother aside, the smaller cub leaned in from the other side, dipping its nose into the fruit as well. They both ate together, noses bumping occasionally, paws brushing as they slurped the cool juice. Unbeknownst to them, they weren't alone. From across the field, a small group of people had gathered. The farmer, his wife, and their teenage daughter had been on their way to check the vines when they spotted the movement near the patch. At first, alarm rushed through them. Bears in the field meant trouble, broken fences, and destroyed crops. But as they stopped and watched, their fear softened into something else entirely. The sight before them was oddly tender. Two wild cubs, instead of fighting or tearing through the field, were quietly sharing a single fruit, their little faces sticky with juice. The daughter raised a hand to her mouth, whispering, "They're sharing." Her father hushed her, eyes fixed on the scene. Years of working the land had taught him to be wary of bears, especially cubs, which meant a mother could be nearby. But still, he couldn't pull his gaze away from the unlikely calm unfolding just a few yards from where they stood. The cubs were completely absorbed in their meal, their soft sounds of munching and slurping carrying faintly across the field. Occasionally, one would pause, lick its paw clean, then go back to eating. Neither showed aggression. Neither tried to claim more than the other. For anyone watching, it was almost human. The farmer's wife leaned closer to her husband and whispered, "Should we do something? What if their mother comes?" He didn't answer right away. His mind flickered with conflicting instincts: protect his field, protect his family, and yet, don't disturb this rare, peaceful moment. Then, the larger cub lifted its head. Its face was smeared with red pulp, and its round eyes blinked toward the humans in the distance. For a tense second, everyone froze. The farmer gripped his daughter's shoulder, ready to pull her back. But the cub didn't growl. It didn't panic. Instead, it tilted its head curiously, then returned to the watermelon, nudging the smaller cub gently as if to make room. The farmer's daughter whispered again, almost breathless, "They're not even scared." Her words lingered in the hot afternoon air. And just then, from somewhere deeper in the trees, came the faint rustle of branches. The sound was heavier, deliberate, the kind of noise that made every human heart in that field skip a beat. The farmer's wife's face drained of color. She knew what it meant. If the cubs were here, then their mother couldn't be far behind. If you were standing in that field and heard the mother bear coming, would you stay and watch, or run immediately? The rustling grew louder, shifting from a faint tremor to a deliberate movement that made the leaves quiver along the tree line. The farmer's hand instinctively tightened on his daughter's shoulder. Every muscle in his body went rigid. He knew the cubs weren't alone, they never were. The cubs, however, remained unbothered. The larger one pawed at the rind, dragging the watermelon slightly closer to its sibling. The smaller cub licked at the last of the flesh, nose dripping with sticky sweetness. They were so consumed by their discovery that they didn't notice the tension building only yards away. The farmer's wife whispered, her voice trembling, "It's her. It has to be." Her husband nodded slowly, eyes locked on the tree line. He didn't dare move. Every instinct screamed at him to gather his family and retreat, but something stronger held him still, curiosity, respect, maybe even awe. And then, she appeared. A mother bear stepped out from the trees, her dark fur gleaming in the late sunlight. She was large, powerful, with the unmistakable presence of an animal built for survival. Yet there was no aggression in her stride. Her head swung low, nose twitching as she caught the scent of her cubs and the watermelon patch. The cubs immediately perked up. Their ears flicked forward, their bodies bouncing with excitement. In an instant, they forgot the fruit and scurried toward her, nuzzling at her legs and pawing gently at her chest. She lowered her head, sniffing them over as if checking for injuries, then gave a soft chuff, a sound of reassurance, of home. The farmer's daughter let out a shaky breath. She's not angry," she whispered. Her father didn't answer. His eyes scanned the scene carefully. He expected the mother to lunge at the sight of humans so close to her cubs. Yet, surprisingly, she didn't. Instead, her attention shifted back to the patch. Her nose brushed against the broken watermelon, her cubs nudging at her paws as if to say, "This is what we found." She didn't eat. Not yet. Instead, she sat back on her haunches, watching her cubs with a patient stillness. They climbed over the leftover rind, nibbling at scraps, licking each other's faces clean. And then something remarkable happened. The mother leaned forward and nudged the watermelon closer to them, as though encouraging them to finish. The farmer's wife blinked in disbelief. "She's letting them eat first." The farmer had seen plenty of bears over the years, but this was different. He expected dominance, a show of strength, the adult taking what belonged to her. But what he witnessed was gentleness. The mother seemed more interested in watching her cubs learn, guiding them rather than controlling them. The cubs climbed back into the patch, discovering more melons hidden beneath the leaves. One pawed at a green rind until it split slightly, and with persistence, the two managed to roll it over. The fruit cracked open, spilling red flesh onto the grass. Instead of fighting for the larger share, they crouched down side by side again, both digging in with tiny growls of pleasure. Their mother remained nearby, silent and watchful, her gaze occasionally flicking toward the humans across the field. The farmer shifted uncomfortably. He could feel her eyes on him, heavy and unblinking. Yet she didn't charge. She didn't bare her teeth. She simply acknowledged them. It was as if she understood that they weren't there to harm her family, that they, too, were just witnesses to a rare kind of peace. The farmer's daughter whispered, "She knows we're here. Why isn't she chasing us off?" No one could answer. The cubs continued their feast, now pawing at yet another melon, their fur sticky, their bellies rounding from the unexpected treat. The field, once a place of work and worry, had transformed into a quiet classroom. The cubs weren't just eating, they were learning. How to find food. How to share it. How to exist together without conflict. The mother bear shifted again, lowering herself onto all fours. For a heartbeat, the farmer thought she might finally react, finally drive them away. Instead, she turned toward her cubs, gave a low rumble, and nudged the watermelon rind closer to them again. The farmer's wife clutched his arm. "Do you see what she's doing? She's teaching them." The moment carried a weight that none of them could shake. This wasn't a display of wild chaos. It was parenting, pure and unfiltered, playing out in a place where few humans ever got to see it. The cubs, tired from their feast, finally flopped down beside each other. Their bellies pressed into the grass, paws sticky and red-stained. The mother leaned down and licked one cub's face clean, then the other, grooming them gently as they squirmed against her. The farmer's daughter's eyes glistened. "She's taking care of them," just like, her voice trailed off. She didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone knew what she meant. Just like a human mother would. For a moment, the field was silent, save for the soft sounds of grooming and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. The farmer's heart swelled with a strange mix of pride and humility. He was standing in the presence of something that went beyond survival, beyond instinct. But then, the silence broke. From the far end of the field came another sound, a creak of tires on gravel. The farmer's head whipped around. His neighbor's truck was pulling up along the edge of the property. And unlike him, his neighbor didn't have a habit of waiting quietly. The truck door slammed shut, echoing across the open space. The cubs' heads shot up, their ears twitching. The mother bear froze, her body stiffening, her eyes darting toward the noise. The farmer cursed under his breath. He knew exactly what this meant. If your neighbor showed up and didn't understand the moment, would you shout to stop him, or stay silent and let nature take its course? The slam of the truck door cracked through the calm like thunder. Dust rose in a cloud around the vehicle, drifting over the watermelon vines. The farmer flinched, his hand still gripping his daughter's shoulder as his stomach sank. He knew his neighbor, Paul, a man who prided himself on protecting his land with force rather than patience. The mother bear stiffened, her muscles tightening beneath her thick fur. Her cubs, startled by the noise, pressed close against her legs, eyes wide, ears flicking nervously. She didn't move toward the humans who had been watching quietly, not yet, but her gaze darted toward the new arrival, sharp and calculating. Paul's voice rang out across the field, coarse and far too loud. "Hey! What the hell's going on here? Bears in the patch." He reached into the back of his truck, and the metallic clink of something heavy followed. The farmer's blood ran cold. He knew exactly what Paul was reaching for. Without thinking, he raised his hand and shouted, "Paul! Stop!" The words sliced through the air. Paul froze, glancing up in confusion. His eyes narrowed when he saw the farmer's family crouched at the edge of the vines. "You've got bears on your land, Bill. You should be thanking me." The farmer shook his head urgently, waving both arms now. "Don't. Not this time. Look. He pointed toward the patch. Paul's gaze followed. At first, all he saw was the massive figure of the mother bear, her broad frame a dark silhouette against the green field. His instinct was the same as always: threat, danger, elimination. But then, his eyes caught on the cubs. Small, sticky-faced, and trembling, they clung to their mother's legs, peeking out cautiously from behind her. "What the?" Paul muttered under his breath, momentarily thrown. The farmer stepped forward, heart hammering in his chest. He knew every step closer to the patch increased his own risk, but he had no choice. They're not here to tear the place apart. They found the fruit, yes, but they're just eating. Look at them, Paul. They're not even fighting over it. They're sharing. Paul frowned, glancing between the farmer and the bears. His grip on the object in his hand, a long metal crowbar, loosened slightly, but his stance remained rigid. "Bill, they're bears. Wild animals. You can't just let them roam through your crops. Next thing you know, they'll be in your barn." The farmer shook his head again, his voice firm. "This isn't about crops. It's about what we're seeing. This is something most people will never witness. Don't ruin it." The cubs whimpered softly, sensing the tension. The mother bear lowered her head, a low rumble vibrating through her chest. It wasn't a roar, not yet, but a warning: don't come closer. The farmer's daughter clutched her mother's hand, whispering urgently, "Dad, he's scaring them." The farmer swallowed hard. He had to keep Paul calm. He had to keep the bears calm. He was the bridge between two worlds that didn't understand each other, and one wrong move could shatter everything. Paul hesitated, his eyes locked on the mother bear. Her steady gaze held his, unflinching, unafraid. She didn't advance. She didn't retreat. She simply stood, shielding her cubs with her body, as if daring him to decide what kind of man he wanted to be in that moment. "Bill," Paul's voice dropped slightly, quieter now. "What if she charges? What if they come at us?" The farmer's reply was almost immediate, his conviction surprising even himself. "She won't. Not unless we give her a reason. Just watch." The silence stretched. For a few tense seconds, no one moved. The cubs squirmed against their mother, their little paws tugging at her fur. Then, slowly, the larger cub toddled back toward the cracked watermelon, nudging its sibling along. The two of them sat side by side once again, scooping at the red flesh with clumsy paws, their sticky faces buried in sweetness. The mother bear followed with her eyes, her body lowering slightly as if the sight calmed her too. Her rumble subsided, replaced with that same patient stillness she had shown before. The farmer turned back to Paul, his voice low but urgent. "Do you see it now? She's teaching them. Not to fight. Not to destroy. To share." Paul's jaw tightened. He glanced again at the cubs, then back at the crowbar in his hand. His grip loosened further. With a reluctant exhale, he set it down on the truck bed behind him. "All right," he muttered. "But don't say I didn't warn you if this goes south." Relief washed through the farmer like cool water. He nodded gratefully, but his eyes never left the bears. The moment was fragile: one loud noise, one sudden move, and it could all collapse. The farmer's wife leaned closer, whispering, "Thank God." But even as she spoke, a new sound rose in the distance. Faint at first, then louder, the laughter of children. The farmer's stomach dropped. School had let out. The playground wasn't far from the orchard. And the sound of curious voices carried easily across the summer air. The mother bear's ears flicked, her head lifting sharply. She turned toward the sound, body tensing once more. The cubs froze mid-bite, looking up at her. The farmer's heart hammered against his ribs. He knew what was coming. If you were the farmer and suddenly heard children's laughter nearby, would you run to warn them, or stay frozen to avoid startling the bear? The laughter carried on the breeze like a flock of birds in flight. High-pitched, carefree, and utterly unaware of the fragile balance in the watermelon patch. The farmer's chest tightened as he turned toward the orchard's edge, where the dirt path from the schoolyard cut between rows of apple trees. And then he saw them. 4 children, backpacks bouncing against their shoulders, skipping along as if the summer afternoon belonged only to them. His daughter's classmates, kids who had wandered this way countless times without a second thought. They had no idea that just beyond the vines, a mother bear and her cubs crouched in quiet tension. The farmer's wife gasped, clutching her daughter's shoulders. The girl whispered frantically, "Dad, they'll scare the cubs." The mother bear's ears swiveled toward the approaching voices. Her nose twitched, drawing in the new scents. She lowered her head, not in retreat but in readiness. Her cubs pressed closer, their small bodies rigid. They didn't understand laughter, they only knew sound could mean danger. Paul muttered under his breath, "This is bad." His hand twitched toward the truck, toward the crowbar he had set down moments ago. The farmer shot him a sharp look. "Don't." Not a sound. Every instinct told him to shout, to wave his arms, to warn the kids away. But his gut screamed the opposite. One sudden yell could trigger panic. Panic could trigger the mother bear's protective rage. Instead, he stepped forward cautiously, raising one hand high above his head. His voice, when it came, was calm but firm, carried low across the field. "Kids, stop. Don't run. Don't move fast. Just stop where you are." The children froze mid-step, their faces scrunching in confusion. One of them giggled nervously. "What's going on?" The farmer's daughter called out, her voice trembling but clear. "There are bears. Right there." She pointed toward the vines. 4 sets of young eyes widened in disbelief. And then, as if choreographed by some cruel hand of fate, all of them craned their necks to see. The cubs were visible now, little heads sticky with watermelon juice, their paws glistening red as if painted. They blinked curiously at the new arrivals, one cub giving a soft, questioning grunt. The mother bear shifted, her broad frame moving between her cubs and the children. Her eyes narrowed, fixing firmly on the smaller humans. The tension in her shoulders was unmistakable, threat assessment. The farmer's throat went dry. He knew what the bear was thinking. She didn't see schoolchildren. She saw new, unpredictable shapes near her young. "Bill," Paul whispered tightly. "You've got seconds before this goes south." The farmer raised both hands now, palms out, a signal meant more for his neighbors and his own family than for the bear. His voice wavered but remained steady enough to carry. "Kids, listen to me. Take one slow step back. Just one. Do not run. Do not scream." One boy's lip quivered. "Are they gonna hurt us?" The farmer forced calm into his voice, even as sweat trickled down his back. "Not if we respect them. Just step back." The children obeyed, though one girl clutched her backpack straps so tightly her knuckles turned white. Their small movements drew the mother bear's sharp gaze, but she didn't advance. Her nose twitched again, taking in their scent, calculating. She rumbled low in her chest, not an attack, but a warning, "I see you. Stay away." The cubs, oblivious to the weight of the moment, squabbled quietly over a chunk of rind, tugging it between their teeth until it split in half. One plopped onto the ground, gnawing contentedly. The other tumbled backward, landing on its side with a squeak before rolling upright again. Their playfulness only sharpened the contrast with their mother's stillness. The farmer exhaled slowly, his voice dropping lower now, meant only for the children. Good. Now another step. Slow. That's it. Don't turn your back. Keep your eyes down. Each tiny shuffle of retreat stretched seconds into eternity. The farmer could feel Paul fidgeting behind him, restless, itching to intervene with force instead of patience. But he didn't dare look away from the children or the bear. One lapse of focus could undo everything. When the children reached the safety of the orchard edge, the farmer gave a small nod. Now stay there. Don't move until I say. The kids huddled together, eyes wide, their voices hushed whispers of fear and awe. The mother bear's rumble faded. She turned back toward her cubs, nudging one gently with her muzzle. Then, with a surprising calmness, she lowered herself into a sitting position at the edge of the vines, her cubs nestled against her sides once more. She licked their sticky faces, grooming them with the patience of a mother who had weathered far worse than curious human children. For a moment, the farmer almost believed the tension was over. That the bear had decided no threat existed. That maybe, just maybe, everyone could stand here together, separated by invisible lines of respect, and coexist in this one fragile patch of earth. But then, a sound ripped through the air, sharp, jarring, and unforgiving. A car horn. From the road beyond the orchard, a vehicle blared twice, impatient and oblivious. The noise rolled across the field like a shockwave. The cubs startled violently, one squealing as it tumbled against its mother. The other darted toward the nearest vine, disappearing in a flurry of leaves. The mother bear surged upright, her massive form suddenly bristling with alarm. The farmer's heart stopped. He knew what came next. The sudden blare of the horn startled the cubs, and their mother was on edge. If you were there, would you freeze completely, or risk moving to calm the children? The horn cut through the late summer air like a blade. Its echo hung in the orchard, bouncing off rows of apple trees, rolling across the melon vines. For one still moment, the entire field seemed to hold its breath. Then, everything broke at once. The cub nearest the vines bolted, tumbling through green leaves with panicked squeals. The second cub tried to scramble onto its mother's back, slipping on her fur, claws raking down her shoulders in desperation. The mother bear bellowed, not an attack roar, but a guttural cry of alarm that vibrated in the farmer's chest like thunder. The farmer's daughter clamped her hands over her ears, eyes squeezed shut. The other children huddled against her, trembling. The farmer's wife pulled them all behind her, shielding their bodies instinctively, though she knew it would mean little against a charging bear. Paul swore under his breath, muscles coiled. That's it, Bill. She's gonna break. We need noise. We need. Stay back, the farmer barked, his voice sharp as a whip. His eyes never left the bear. He saw the whites of her teeth, the flaring of her nostrils, the raw confusion in her posture. She wasn't attacking yet, not yet. But one wrong move could tip her over the edge. The farmer knew that kind of fear. He had seen it in livestock, in stray dogs cornered by kids, even in his own daughter once during a thunderstorm. But here it was multiplied, amplified by instinct and by the weight of a mother defending her young. He lifted his arms high again, palms out. He took 2 deliberate steps forward, planting himself between the orchard line and the bear, between his community and the wild. His voice was low, steady, almost like he was talking to the skittish horses in his barn. "It's all right. Easy, girl. No one's hurting your babies." The mother bear's growl softened slightly, becoming more of a rumble, a warning still, but less explosive. Her cub clung to her leg, trembling, wide-eyed. Then the car horn blared again. This time it wasn't distant. The vehicle had slowed near the orchard, the driver leaning out of the window in confusion at the sight of so many people standing motionless in a field. The sound shattered the fragile calm. The cub bolted deeper into the patch, vanishing in the tangle of vines. The other tried to follow but stumbled, mewling pitifully. The mother bear turned, torn between her two young. Her head whipped left, then right, and for a terrifying heartbeat it looked as though she might choose the path toward the humans, an instinct to clear danger before retrieving her cubs. The farmer's lungs seized. His daughter whispered, "Daddy?" His decision came fast, instinct overriding fear. He turned his head sharply toward the road and shouted with every ounce of force in his chest. "Stop honking. Drive on." His voice boomed across the field, echoing off trees. The driver, startled, froze. Then, as if realizing the gravity of what they'd stumbled into, the car rolled forward slowly, leaving the orchard edge in silence once more. But the damage was done. The balance was broken. The cubs cried out for their mother in two different directions, one near the vines, the other deeper in the patch. The bear swayed on her paws, grunting, torn between them. She stamped once, hard, the ground trembling beneath her weight. "Bill," Paul hissed. "I've got it." The farmer didn't sound certain, but he forced confidence into his tone. His voice dropped again, low and even. "Go to them. They need you. We won't move. Just go." He wasn't sure if she understood the words, but he knew animals understood tone. And in that moment, tone was all he had to offer. The mother bear swung her massive head toward him, eyes sharp, burning with wild intensity. For a long breath, man and bear locked stares across the watermelon patch, the silence punctuated only by the mewling of her cubs. Then, with a guttural snort, she made her choice. She turned sharply and lumbered toward the nearest cry, gathering the first cub in her muzzle. With surprising gentleness, she lifted it by the scruff, carrying it deeper into the vines. The second cub's cries grew louder, desperate, and she doubled back, pulling it close to her side. The sight nearly melted the farmer's knees, relief flooding his veins as he saw the bear's priority shift back to her young instead of the humans. But relief was fragile. The children were still too close. Paul was still tense behind him. The bear, though calmer, was far from gone. The farmer whispered to his wife, never lowering his gaze from the bear, "Take the kids back. Slowly. To the house." Her breath trembled, but she obeyed, ushering the children step by careful step through the orchard rows. Paul hissed, "What about you?" The farmer answered without hesitation. "I'm not leaving until she's out of this field." The mother bear licked her cubs, nudging them back toward the thicket of trees at the field's edge. But the cubs resisted, drawn again to the sweet scent of watermelon. One cub, stubborn as a child testing boundaries, plopped back down on a broken rind and began gnawing noisily. The farmer's heart sank. If she couldn't pull them away, this standoff might last hours. And the sun was already beginning to sink lower, shadows stretching long across the vines. The mother bear had calmed, but her cubs still refused to leave the watermelon patch. If you were the farmer, would you stay rooted and wait, or risk moving closer to drive them out? The light was shifting now, the golden glow of late afternoon giving way to a deeper orange that stained the sky. Shadows stretched across the field, long and heavy, making the orchard feel both beautiful and ominous. The sweet smell of split watermelons was now mixed with the earthy scent of cooling soil and the faint tang of fear lingering in the air. The farmer stayed rooted, legs steady though every instinct screamed to back away with his family. His arms ached from holding them half-raised, but he didn't dare let them drop. His heartbeat hammered in his ears. The mother bear still loomed near the vines, her cubs scrambling at her legs, one whining, the other still gnawing stubbornly at a half-eaten melon rind. Her muzzle was streaked with juice, her fur matted with dust. She looked less threatening now, less like a predator and more like what she truly was, a tired mother trying to manage two restless youngsters. But appearances didn't soften the danger. Paul edged closer behind him, whispering in a tone tight with impatience. "Bill, this can't go on forever. They're not leaving. She's got no reason to. We've got kids in the house, for God's sake." The farmer didn't look back. His eyes stayed locked on the bear, reading every twitch, every grunt. "She'll leave. She has to. Night's coming, Paul. Bears don't stay in open fields after dark." But even as he said it, a part of him wondered if that was true, or if it was just what he needed to believe to keep standing there. A breeze rustled through the apple trees. Crickets began their evening chorus, their chirping rising like a warning. The cub chewing on the rind squeaked happily, oblivious to the standoff, while the other nuzzled closer to its mother, tired and whimpering. The farmer could feel the tension spreading, rippling beyond this small patch of earth. He knew the neighbors had seen the commotion. Already, he spotted movement near the road, silhouettes gathering at the orchard's edge. Townsfolk. Onlookers. Some curious, some worried, some holding phones up to capture shaky videos. The farmer's jaw tightened. The last thing he wanted was a crowd. More eyes meant more noise, more chances for someone to panic and make the wrong move. "Paul," he murmured, his voice barely above the crickets, "you see them by the road?" Paul swore under his breath. "Yeah. Half the town's showing up." The farmer clenched his fists, then slowly raised one hand and motioned firmly for silence toward the distant figures. A few seemed to understand, lowering their voices, but others still whispered, their murmurs carrying across the field like gnats. The bear's ears twitched. She shifted, her massive head swinging toward the road, nostrils flaring. The cubs froze at her legs, sensing her alertness. The farmer's pulse spiked. If she connected the crowd with danger, all of his careful stillness could collapse in an instant. He raised his voice just enough, projecting toward the gathering silhouettes without shouting. "Quiet. Everyone stay still." For a heartbeat, the field hushed. The only sound was the gentle crunch of the cub returning to its watermelon, chewing like it was the safest place in the world. The farmer exhaled slowly, trying to steady his shaking lungs. But dusk was thickening, and with it came new risks. Bears grew bolder under shadow. People grew careless. And fear had a way of finding cracks in even the strongest discipline. His daughter's voice drifted faintly from the orchard, carried on the wind. "Daddy, are you coming inside?" It nearly broke him. He wanted nothing more than to take her hand, to tuck her safely into bed, to leave this entire standoff behind. But he couldn't, not while the bear was still here, not while the cubs refused to leave. He called back, voice calm though it scraped his throat, "Not yet, honey. Soon." The mother bear turned sharply at the sound of his voice, her eyes catching the last flare of sunlight. For a split second, their gazes met again, man and animal bound in a fragile thread of recognition. The farmer lowered his arms slightly, palms still open, trying to look less like a threat, more like a presence. He didn't know if it mattered. He didn't know if any of this mattered. But then something shifted. The second cub, the stubborn one, finally tired of its rind. With a soft grunt, it waddled back to its mother, pressing its sticky muzzle into her side. The first cub climbed halfway onto her back, clinging like a child too tired to walk. The mother bear huffed, heavy and low. She nudged them both toward the orchard's edge, her massive body swaying as she herded them closer to the tree line. The farmer's chest lifted with a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Was this it? Was she finally leaving? The cubs resisted at first, but she persisted, nudging, growling gently, coaxing them toward the dark safety of the woods. Step by step, the bear family moved closer to the orchard's boundary. The crowd at the road seemed to sense it too, whispering, shifting. Someone even clapped softly, as if applauding the retreat. The sound shattered the moment. The mother bear froze, ears snapping toward the noise. The cubs pressed tighter against her legs, whining. She swung her head back toward the farmer, her gaze sharp again, suspicion reigniting. The farmer's stomach dropped. One wrong noise had just undone the fragile exit. And the bear wasn't moving anymore. The bears were finally turning back toward the woods, until a single noise froze them in their tracks. If you were standing in that crowd, would you dare to make a sound, or hold your breath in silence? The mother bear froze, her broad frame outlined against the darkening orchard. Her ears flicked like radar dishes, swiveling toward the road where the faint clap had echoed. Both cubs pressed tight against her legs, whining softly. The farmer's heart sank. He had been so close, just a few more steps and they would have been gone. Now the bear was coiled again, suspicion written in every line of her body. Behind him, the murmurs swelled. A crowd had formed, more neighbors than he realized. Families, teenagers, even a couple of men from the hardware store. Phones glowed in their hands, tiny blue screens capturing the scene, some voices whispering, others urging each other to stay back. The farmer wanted to shout, to demand silence, but he knew raising his voice again could be the final crack that sent the bear charging. He clenched his jaw, sweat dripping down his temple. Paul muttered under his breath. "This is bad, Bill. Half the town's here. We can't control all of them." "Then don't let them push forward," the farmer whispered sharply. "Hold them back. Do whatever you have to." Paul hesitated but then backed toward the road, spreading his arms, barking low instructions at the onlookers. "Stay quiet. Stay still. Put the phones away. This isn't a circus." Some listened. Some didn't. The farmer refocused on the bear. She hadn't moved, but her gaze was darting now, from the crowd to the farmer, from the farmer to the trees. The cubs tugged at her fur, restless. Minutes passed. The air grew heavy with the first hum of night insects. Shadows thickened under the apple trees. The farmer's mind raced. He knew bears avoided people. But he also knew they avoided being trapped. And with the crowd forming a wall at one end of the orchard and him at the other, she might begin to feel cornered. He spoke again, low and steady. "Easy, girl. It's all right. You'll be gone soon." The bear grunted, a deep rumble that resonated in his chest. Then, unexpectedly, she sat down, right there in the patch. Her cubs scrambled into her lap, pawing at her fur, climbing her shoulders. The crowd gasped softly at the sight, some charmed, some terrified. The farmer's breath hitched. This wasn't a retreat. This was a pause. She was waiting. Watching. Testing. The cubs, oblivious, pawed at another watermelon nearby, smashing it open with clumsy joy. The sticky sound of rind splitting filled the orchard, followed by the wet crunch of their teeth. The farmer swallowed hard. If the cubs kept eating, this could last all night. And more people would keep arriving. Already, headlights flickered on the road as another car pulled up, its beams sweeping across the field. The bear stiffened, a low growl vibrating through her chest. The cubs froze, juice dripping from their muzzles. "Kill the lights." Paul barked toward the road. The beams snapped off, plunging the orchard into deeper dusk. But the damage lingered. The mother bear rose again, her posture tense. She huffed loudly, pushing her cubs back toward her chest. The farmer's throat tightened. This was a turning point. She could either bolt for the woods or charge toward the nearest noise. He could feel the weight of the crowd behind him, their collective fear pressing against his back. He knew some of them were hoping for drama, for a story to tell. He hated that. They didn't see the danger. They didn't feel the fragile line he was standing on. He took a slow step sideways, putting himself more clearly between the bear and the road. His boots sank slightly into the damp soil, crunching on melon rinds. The bear's eyes tracked him instantly. The farmer's voice stayed calm, even though his chest was pounding. "Go on. Take them. Back to the woods. You don't belong here." The cubs squeaked, pulling at her fur. She grunted again, swinging her head toward the orchard line. For a flicker of a second, hope surged. She nudged one cub forward, then the other. They stumbled toward the trees, sticky-faced and whining, but moving in the right direction. The crowd rustled, murmurs of relief rising. Someone whispered too loudly, "They're leaving." The mother bear froze again. The farmer's stomach dropped. He wanted to curse, to shout at the crowd, to demand silence. But before he could, the bear swung her massive head toward the noise, her eyes flashing in the dim light. The cubs cried, confused. The orchard seemed to shrink, air tightening like a drum. The bear was caught between the pull of the woods and the pressure of human presence. The farmer knew the next move would decide everything. The townsfolk whispered too loudly, and now the mother bear's focus snapped back to them. If you were the farmer, would you trust the crowd to stay silent, or risk stepping closer to drive her toward the woods? Night had fully fallen over the orchard, the air cooling fast, carrying the damp smell of crushed melons and apple leaves. The crowd had grown larger, more headlights lined the road, even though Paul kept ordering them off. People were restless, torn between awe and fear, between wanting a closer look and knowing it could end badly. The farmer stayed focused on the bear. Every breath of hers was audible, every grunt a warning. The cubs circled her legs, squeaking and tugging at her fur. One cub pawed at her chest as if begging to be lifted. She didn't move. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, locked on the human voices. Her ears twitched at every murmur, every shuffle of boots on dirt. The farmer knew this couldn't last. The longer she lingered, the greater the chance of something breaking wrong, a child crying in the crowd, a car door slamming, someone making the mistake of shouting. He leaned his weight forward, heart pounding. He thought of the watermelons, dozens cracked open, their sweet scent spilling into the air. This had drawn the bear family in, and it was keeping them here. As long as the fruit remained, so would the temptation. Paul appeared at his side again, face pale in the shadows. Bill, we've got to do something. She's not moving. Half the town's here, and they're not leaving until it's over. You know how people are. The farmer's jaw tightened. I know. What do you want me to do? Paul asked. The farmer glanced at the crowd. He saw kids pressed against their parents' legs, teenagers daring each other to get closer, men whispering like this was a show. Anger flared in him. This wasn't a show. This was life and death balanced on a thread. You keep them back, he said. Don't let a single one step forward. If she feels cornered, we're all in trouble. Paul nodded grimly and moved back toward the people, spreading his arms again, trying to enforce some order. The farmer took another slow step forward. The bear's head turned instantly, her nostrils flaring. He raised his hand, palm open. His voice was calm, steady, though his stomach churned. It's all right. You've had enough. Time to go home now. The cubs squeaked, tugging at her again. One stumbled toward the tree line, then circled back, unwilling to leave without her. The farmer could feel it, she wanted to go. But something held her in place. He realized then what it was. The melons. Everywhere around her, broken rinds glistened in the moonlight, dripping sweetness into the soil. The cubs still licked at them between tugs at her fur. She was torn, protect them, feed them, and escape. The farmer took a breath. He'd been quiet long enough. Now, maybe, he had to act. He crouched slowly, picked up a shard of rind at his feet, and tossed it sideways, away from the orchard, into the field beyond. It landed with a soft thud. The bear's head whipped toward the sound. Her body swayed, considering. The farmer picked up another and threw it farther, toward the woods. It skidded across the dirt, the scent carrying. The cubs perked up, noses twitching. One squeaked and bounded a few steps after it before looking back for her. The mother bear rumbled low in her throat. The farmer's pulse raced. Was he leading her out, or provoking her? Behind him, the crowd murmured again, some realizing what he was trying to do. A child gasped, and a parent hushed them quickly. The mother bear took one slow step toward the woods. The cubs scrambled after her, hesitant, whining, but moving. The farmer's chest swelled with relief. It was working. He reached for another rind. Then, a shout tore through the night. Don't let them get away. The farmer's blood ran cold. He turned sharply. A man from the crowd had stepped forward, phone in hand, trying to push past Paul. His voice was loud, reckless, excited. I need a better shot. The bear froze, cub stumbling against her legs. Her head swung back toward the crowd, eyes glinting. She let out a roar, deep, guttural, shaking the orchard. The crowd screamed and staggered back, some running for the road. Phones tumbled into the dirt. The cubs squealed, clinging to her fur. The farmer's heart pounded. He knew what came next. If she charged, nothing would stop her. He dropped the rind in his hand and stepped forward, closer than he'd ever dared. His boots crushed watermelon flesh. His breath came ragged, but his voice was steady. Look at me, he said firmly. The bear's head snapped toward him. Not them. Me. She huffed, pawing at the ground. Her cubs squeaked, trying to climb her legs. The farmer raised both hands, palms open, standing tall. His voice carried across the orchard, quiet but unwavering. You don't want them. You just want out. So take them and go. Her body trembled, torn between instinct and fear. The orchard fell silent except for the cub's whines and the thump of the farmer's heart. Then, slowly, she nudged her cubs toward the tree line again. The farmer didn't breathe. He didn't dare. Step by step, she pushed them closer to the shadows. The crowd behind him dared not move. Even the reckless man was frozen now, pale and wide-eyed. The farmer's pulse throbbed in his ears. He knew this wasn't over. She was moving, yes, but all it would take was one more slip, one more noise, and the orchard could erupt in chaos. And then, just as the cubs reached the edge of the trees, something moved in the darkness. Two glowing eyes blinked back from the woods. The farmer's stomach dropped. Another bear. Just as the mother bear began to retreat, another pair of eyes appeared in the woods. Would you stand your ground or run before the situation doubled in danger? The orchard, moments before filled with cautious relief, now tightened like a drum. Those glowing eyes at the edge of the woods held everyone captive. They blinked once, then again, slow and deliberate. The farmer's throat went dry. Another bear. The mother froze where she stood, cubs pressing tighter against her. She rumbled a low growl, not at the humans this time, but at the unseen shape in the dark. The crowd shifted nervously, whispers cutting through the still night. Paul hissed at them to stay quiet, but the panic was building again, ready to spill. The farmer stayed rooted, forcing himself to breathe. One bear was dangerous enough. Two could be catastrophic. Especially if they weren't from the same family. He raised his voice carefully, steady, carrying across the orchard. Stay calm. Don't move. The cubs whimpered, tugging at their mother's fur. She swung her head back and forth, torn between the humans behind her and the threat in front of her. Every muscle in her body quivered, caught between fight and flight. Then, from the shadows, the second bear stepped forward. It was larger, broader shoulders, darker fur that glistened faintly under the moonlight. A boar. The farmer's stomach sank. A male bear? Boars were dangerous to cubs. More dangerous than humans in some cases. He'd read it, heard it from rangers. Males would sometimes kill cubs to force a female back into mating season. The orchard suddenly felt much smaller, trapped between two forces of nature. The mother bear roared, a deep, furious sound that rolled across the field. She planted herself between her cubs and the approaching boar. Her back arched, head low, jaws bared. The cubs squeaked in terror, scuttling behind her legs. The crowd gasped. Someone muttered, "My God." Paul glanced at the farmer, panic in his eyes. "Bill, what do we do?" The farmer's heart thundered. He had no easy answer. He couldn't control this. He couldn't reason with instinct. All he could do was keep the crowd from making it worse. "Keep everyone back," he said through clenched teeth. "No shouting, no sudden moves. If they fight, we can't stop it." The boar took another step into the orchard, sniffing the air, ignoring the humans completely. His focus was on the cubs. The farmer could feel the tension building like a storm about to break. He had seconds, maybe less, before the mother would lunge to defend her young. If that happened, blood would spill in front of the whole town. He forced himself to think. Why had the boar come? The scent. The melons. The same lure that had drawn the family in was now drawing others. The farmer glanced at the ground, broken rinds, sticky pulp, seeds scattered like bait. The orchard was no longer just his, it was calling the whole wild to it. His mind raced. He couldn't stop nature, but maybe he could redirect it. He stooped quickly, grabbing another large rind. The mother's roar shook the orchard as the boar drew closer, but he ignored it, focused only on his plan. With a grunt, he hurled the rind far past the boar, deep into the woods. It landed with a muffled thump, scattering pulp and seeds. The boar's head snapped toward the sound. His ears twitched, nose lifting, catching the stronger scent carried by the night breeze. The farmer grabbed another rind and threw it farther still, deeper into the shadows. His arm ached, but he didn't stop. The boar hesitated. The mother's growls lowered, steady and defensive. The cubs huddled tighter. Another rind sailed into the woods. Another splash of scent. The boar finally turned, lumbering a few steps toward the sound. His bulk moved with slow, deliberate power, as if weighing the better option. The mother stayed rigid, guarding her cubs, ready to fight if he turned back. The orchard held its breath. Step by step, the boar drifted into the darkness, following the scattered trail of sweetness. His massive form melted back into the shadows, the glowing eyes fading until only the night remained. The farmer let out a shaky breath. But the danger wasn't over. The mother was still there, trembling, agitated, her cubs pressed against her legs. She turned her head toward the farmer again, eyes wild, body still on the edge of explosion. Behind him, the crowd rustled nervously. Phones clicked, whispers rose, someone sobbed softly. The farmer raised his hands again, voice steady but firmer now. Easy. It's over. Take them home. The mother huffed, her breath pluming in the cool air. She looked toward the woods where the boar had vanished, then down at her cubs, then back at the orchard. For a long moment, she didn't move. And then, with a low grunt, she nudged her cubs forward. They squeaked, stumbling into the shadows of the tree line. She followed, heavy paws leaving imprints in the soil. The orchard seemed to exhale all at once. People broke into murmurs, some gasping in relief, some clutching each other. Paul leaned heavily on his knees, sweat shining on his forehead. The farmer stayed standing, hands still raised, eyes fixed on the dark woods. He knew better than to celebrate too soon. The family had retreated, yes. But the orchard had changed tonight. The melons had drawn them in, and it would draw more. He lowered his hands slowly, the weight of it all pressing down. Paul came up beside him, voice hushed. Bill, that was the bravest damn thing I've ever seen. The farmer shook his head. It wasn't bravery. It was luck. But as he said it, his gaze stayed locked on the tree line, where the last rustle of leaves marked the family's departure. The orchard was quiet again. But it was not the same. He knew this wasn't the end. Because bears remember. And now, they knew where the melons were. The mother bear finally led her cubs into the woods, but the orchard is no longer safe. If you were the farmer, would you risk keeping the melons, or destroy them to stop the bears from returning? Morning light always brings a different perspective, but for the farmer, dawn only deepened the weight of the night before. He stood at the edge of his orchard, boots sunk into damp soil, watching the mist curl low across the watermelon patch. The remains of the feast were everywhere, rinds torn into jagged edges, pulp trampled, seeds scattered like black pearls across the dirt. It looked less like a harvest and more like a battlefield. Paul came walking up the road, coffee in hand, eyes bleary. Couldn't sleep either, huh? The farmer shook his head. Not after that. Paul took a sip, then glanced toward the orchard. You saved us last night. If that boar had pushed through, he stopped himself, the thought too heavy to finish. But the farmer wasn't thinking about what didn't happen. He was thinking about what would. The cubs had tasted sweetness. The mother had learned a safe place to feed. And the boar had followed the scent. This wasn't a one-time event. It was the start of something that could spiral. As the day went on, word spread. Townsfolk stopped by, some out of gratitude, others out of morbid curiosity. They wanted to see the patch where bears had feasted, to stand where fear had nearly turned into tragedy. One woman asked if the farmer would keep a camera out here, you'd get a fortune in footage. Another man muttered about shutting the orchard down completely, calling the wildlife service before someone got hurt. The farmer listened, nodded, but inside he wrestled. That night, when the orchard was quiet again, he walked row by row, lantern swinging. His hand brushed over the vines, over the last intact melons. He could smell them, even in the cool night air, the same sweetness that had drawn the bears. He paused by the biggest melon, round and heavy, gleaming faintly in the lantern's light. He thought of the cubs, paws sticky with juice, muzzles pressed together in a rare moment of peace. And then he thought of the mother's roar, raw with fear and fury. He thought of the boar, looming at the edge, eyes fixed on the cubs. The orchard was no longer his alone. It had become a crossroads, where human cultivation met the raw hunger of the wild. He raised his lantern higher, scanning the dark tree-line. Somewhere out there, the family waited. He could feel it. Maybe they were already watching, remembering. The farmer lowered the lantern and sighed. He knew what he had to do. The next morning, he gathered the town in front of the barn. Paul stood at his side. The crowd buzzed with questions, with gossip, with nerves still frayed from the night before. The farmer raised his hands. "I've made my decision." The murmurs stilled. "I'm plowing under the patch." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone shouted, "You can't. It's the pride of this orchard." Another muttered, "What about the festivals, the fairs? What about the money?" The farmer's voice stayed steady. "We can't keep it. Not like this. The melons are calling them in. Cubs, mothers, even boars. If we keep feeding the wild won't stay peaceful. And the next time might not end the way it did last night." Silence followed. Heavy, reluctant, but understanding. Paul clapped a hand on his shoulder. "He's right. We all saw it. This isn't just about crops anymore. It's about lives." The farmer looked out at the crowd, saw their tired faces, their worried eyes. And then he saw something else, acceptance. Hard, reluctant, but real. That afternoon, the tractor rolled out. Rows of vines were turned under, the sweet scent of crushed melons rising into the air. It hurt, every pass of the blade felt like tearing up more than plants. It felt like tearing up a piece of history. But it was necessary. As the sun set, the farmer parked the tractor and stood at the edge of the bare field. Only fragments of rind remained, glistening faintly like broken shells. He turned toward the woods, half expecting to see those glowing eyes again. And for a moment, he did. 2 cubs, at the tree-line. Watching. Their heads tilted, bodies half hidden by brush. The mother stood behind them, massive and silent, her breath misting in the cool air. They looked not hungry now, but curious. Confused. The farmer raised a hand, slow and steady. Not waving, not shooing. Just acknowledging. The mother huffed, low and deep, and nudged her cubs back. The brush rustled, and they were gone. He lowered his hand, a lump rising in his throat. The orchard was quiet again. But he knew this wasn't the end. Not really. The bears would remember the sweetness. They might return, searching. Yet maybe, just maybe, they would remember something else too. The calm. The way humans had stood their ground without violence. The way a farmer had chosen to sacrifice crops for safety, for respect. Because peace isn't always about what you gain. Sometimes it's about what you let go. As the farmer walked back to the barn, lantern swinging gently in the dusk, he thought of the cubs, sticky pawed, sharing watermelon under the stars. He smiled faintly. The world was full of hunger and risk. But sometimes, even in the most unlikely places, it was also full of peace. And so, the patch was gone, not because of fear, but because of respect. The bears had found sweetness, but the real story wasn't about melons. It was about choice. About humans and animals learning to share the same ground without spilling blood. What would you have done? Would you have given up the crop to keep the peace, or risked it for one more harvest?